was just ding-dong-s of electrical impulses. It was all slightly unbelievable.
Can somebody give me a mic? And would somebody please turn off the fucking reverb? Thank you. Narration, take one. When did the 60s begin? That might seem obvious. Everyone remembers them this way. But really, the early 60s looked like this, a black and white picket fence world still stuck in the 50s. But in 1964, this man, Ken Kesey, took an LSD-fueled bus trip across the country that changed everything. Kesey lit the fuse for the explosion of the 60s. Who was Ken Kesey? He looks innocent enough, doesn't he? Not like the kind of guy to take massive amounts of LSD. While in college, Kesey married his junior high school sweetheart, Faye. As a college athlete, Kesey showed promise both as a football player and a wrestler. Kesey also liked performing as an actor and a ventriloquist. He loved the magic trick of speaking through other people. Ken, when did you decide to become a writer?
I never said I wanted to be a writer. I'm a magician. Writing is just one of the tricks that I do.
And quite a trick it was. By 1964, at the age of 29, Kesey was one of America's greatest writers. His first two published novels were One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Sometimes a Great Notion. Yet, at the height of his success, Ken traded his typewriter for a movie camera.
If Shakespeare were writing today, I don't think he would use a quill pen. So I started going out and taping with tape recorders and filming to see if people talk like they do in novels, and they don't.
With a group of friends, Kesey set out to make a road movie. Their trip would become a legend, but few ever saw the film. There were technical problems. Their voices are on audio tape, but almost never in sync with the picture.
Again, the transmission of a 27 Buick into second gear around the corner at 34th and Deer, or was it Clark, somewhere along here.
Here's a scene with Neil Cassidy, the famous speed-taking real-life inspiration for Jack Kerouac's famous novel, On the Road. For 40 years, Kesey and his friends edited the film, never getting what they wanted. Then it was boxed away, forgotten, collecting dust. Now, we're going back to the vaults, using the rare film and audio interviews of Ken and his friends to bring the story back to life.
Let's go record!
Unnecessarily, Mr. Cassidy proceeded north.
Correct, children, to the left, correct. As you journey through life, you know.
When did the idea for this trip first occur to you?
1963 came, and everything changed. We'd gone back, me and George and Faye, to New York.
New York City extends its welcome. The shops on the avenues, the new hotels, restaurants, the sidewalk cafes, the hit shows, the tinsel of Broadway.
We had gone back to see the opening of Cuckoo's Nest on Broadway with Kirk Douglas playing McMurphy, and he was terrific.
After the play, part of our daytime diversion as we were cruising around the city, we took a drive out to Queens where the construction was going on for the World's Fair.
Here on this very site is to be erected, they're doing it at the moment, the symbol of the theme of the New York World's Fair, the Unisphere.
And by dialing 1964, I launch the final phase of this great effort.
We looked at it and said, boy, this is spectacular. We're going to want to come see this.
We vowed next year we'd go back to New York to the World's Fair. On the way back, I was driving across country in a big old nice station wagon with a couple of my buddies, nibbling on cactus.
During the ABC newsroom in New York, we first received the flash.
As we were driving along, Kennedy began to be killed.
3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting.
The crowd outside is quiet and waiting for some word of the condition of the president. The president's death is officially confirmed.
President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
Everywhere you went, you looked in people's eyes, and they all felt the same thing. It wasn't just sadness. It was a loss of an innocence, the loss of the idea that always the good is going to prevail.
The tragedy of this day is beyond any instant comprehension.
There's no way to even nearly depict the pain and the feeling of crisis. The thing that all of us sort of feel when it's real dark.
This is not an ordinary Saturday. Things have changed.
This world that I was presenting with these words, I began to suspect might not have a whole lot to do with the world of this.
So we decided to go travel across the country. I love to drive across the United States, go to the World's Fair and come back across, just to experience the American landscape and heartscape. We're going to take the same station wagon. We came back in, and pretty soon Babs was home and he wanted to go.
I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, flew helicopters in Vietnam, and came out in May of '64. Got out of the Marine Corps. I had enough of that.
Babs was stalking around. This is just after he got out of the Marines. He began to assign names to them. He became the Intrepid Traveler, and these were his merry band of pranksters. Swashbuckler became my nickname. Gretch had come down from Oregon. We'd met her.
I was an art student at the University of Oregon. My intention was to get a ride. I was going to work in New York, swimming at the World's Fair in water ballet, because that's something I knew how to do. The Rockettes in water.
And pretty soon, Hagen was there, who's an old friend from Oregon, fraternity brother. He had a camera. Sandy, he was a phenomenon. He was in the nut house. He was like the id stripped of everything else. He was just there. At his worst, he was crazy, and at his best, he was a genius.
Jane Burton, who was a professor in philosophy from Stanford.
She was pregnant and she was hungry all the time. So she says, well, I'm generally famished. And so she became known as generally famished.
It got to be kind of a party. It's hard to describe it. Just a Bunch of lunatics running around acting idiotic, trying to get to the East Coast somehow.
I met Ken on Perry Lane.
Chloe was the Gertrude Stein of our scene.
I thought it was pretty insane, actually. I really dug everybody for doing it.
Zonker was just there. He wasn't even planning, we weren't planning to take him, we barely knew him. Every time something would happen, he'd fall asleep. And he had this snore.
Okay, here's stark naked. Now, I'm attracted to her. There's no question about it. But she's just so strange.
Michael Hagan invited me to Ken's house for a weekend, and that's how I met everybody. There was just a great deal of general joviality and talking and laughing and dancing, and even then, it was like a troupe of minstrels and mimes. Their presence was very beautiful.
The notion of us being wild crazies wasn't true. We weren't long-haired and we weren't irresponsible. There was an American sense. That's why we always wore a red, white, and blue and flew the flag. It was to try to cool the people out and say, hey, look, this may look strange to you, but get used to it. It's American. Without it, we're a dead nation.
Since it turned out that there were so many of us, friends and everything, too many of us to go in one or two cars, we decided we'd buy a bus and we'd all travel together.
Put on your red dress, baby. Lord, we going out tonight.
We took a 1939 International Harvester school bus.
I got out there with a blindfold. It was your left brain working before it even knew it was the left brain.
Roy was the real painter among us.
First, it didn't appeal to me at all because I thought it looked really good the way it was. Orange with black stripes. Once it was obvious that it was going to happen, I just went ahead. The challenge was to mix it up there so it would be interesting to look at. Somebody just took an old broom up on the top and spilled some paint around, and, you know, people walked around with their bare feet on the bus, leaving footprints of paint.
First it was black and white, then a million different psychedelic colors, and then it would be painted over. I think they must have painted it over 5 or 10 times.
And we decided, well, hey, if we're going to do this bus trip, let's film it. We bought real color film, 16 millimeter, and we'd gotten several real 16 millimeter cameras, and we decided we're going to make a film.
So what kind of film were you making? A feature like Gone with the Wind?
Yeah.
Did anyone on board know how to use the cameras?
None of us knew how to do anything that we were doing.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna knock him dead.
Well, I heard the bus was called Further.
Right.
What does further mean?
Oh, I get that question a lot. Oh, it always kind of disappoints me.
What, the people ask you what further means?
Uh-huh.
Well, I could look it up in the dictionary and tell you that it means farther along than this.
No.
I'm pretty disappointed.
Farther is a distance. Further is a bus. One is a philosophical concept, the other is a measurement.
What do you think, Ken? We needed to do some modifications. We were at a welding shop that was also a junkyard, and we saw this big commercial clothes dryer, and it looked like a tank turret, and we decided we wanted a turret on the top. So we had this welder guy cut a big hole in the top of the bus. I had a motorcycle that we took along, so we had a platform welded on the back of it that we could carry the motorcycle and a generator on. Chuck had donated a 5 kW gas generator.
Ken, why was the idea of a road trip so appealing?
We weren't old enough to be beatniks, and we were a little too old to be hippies. But everybody I knew had read On the Road, and it opened up the doors to us just the same way drugs did.
It gave us a new way to look at America, and it stirred us up.
So, in America, when the sun goes down, and I sit on the old broken down river pier watching the long, long skies over New Jersey, and sense all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the West Coast, and all that road going, think of Dean Moriarty, I think of Dean Moriarty.
Oh, and I'm the type of guy who will never settle down. Where pretty girls are, well, you know that I'm around. I kiss them.
A two-tone pink and purple Dodge, riding low on tortured shocks, spurting smoke, races across the curve, over the bridge and skids to the porch. Slams and Kesey stands, hands on hips, watching the arrival.
The car made a rapid approach, and he fit into this place.
There was 8 to 5 on you getting through there.
People were hollering, nobody could park there. You can't fit it through. No, no. Come on, Cassidy, come on, man.
But I'm going nowhere. Oh, yeah, I'm the type of guy that likes to roam around. I'm never in one place. I roam from town to town.
Before the smoke had cleared, there was this guy with no shirt on, talking a mile a minute. We all knew who he was. This was Dean Moriarty. I couldn't believe it, our famous Dean Moriarty.
I'm a wanderer. Yeah, a wanderer.
I'd read On the Road, so I knew he was supposed to be Dean Moriarty, but I didn't like that character in the book too much. And I liked Neil better.
All of a sudden, out pops this man, almost from nowhere. He reminded me more of an Irish leprechaun at first. When he opened his mouth, he said about 40 words. And all of a sudden, everything in the universe was and is all right, and all beautiful, and all funny and meaningful, all at the same time.
I'm the type of guy that likes to roam around.
For me, I'm watching it all and thinking, wow, he kind of looks like my dad. And my dad is going to drive the bus.
He came along kind of as a father figure. I got to take care of you boys, understand, change your tires. Here I got this 8-ton jack. I got this lug wrench. You guys don't even have a lug wrench in your goddamn bus. Here, look, I got a couple of spare inner tubes. This boot goes inside. You never saw a boot before. Probably goes inside the spare tire. And a big tire. You know, we're talking about 1,000 by 20.
We started out in La Honda, and there was all this big deal. We'd been getting ready for days and packing and fixing, and finally it was the moment we were leaving La Honda, and everybody gathered around and waved us goodbye, and we climbed on the bus.
Fuck the horn!
And it started off, and it went out the gate and across the bridge and ran out of gas.
Well, the moment of departure was beautiful. We ran out of gas on Kesey's bridge. We figured at that rate, 25 feet an hour. We had a week to get to New York. We weren't worried.
This is taking disorganization to some sort of peak.
It was just ludicrous. And somehow or other, that was just like the perfect omen for the start of this trip.
I used to think I was Napoleon, too.
We set out just like in Easy Rider or Travels with Charlie, where Steinbeck sets out to seek the soul of America.
It looked like a traveling pleasure palace. We could ride across the country in total comfort. It was big and roomy and spacious until we got all the people in it. Then it was crowded. It was the exact opposite of a pleasure palace.
And those the 72 disciples. I was on the first 24 hours that it took us to get from La Honda to San Jose. I don't know, what is it, 40 miles? It took us 24 hours to get to San Jose.
We didn't get very far, and mechanical spasms started happening on the bus, and the engine was sputtering, so we pulled into a gas station.
Some old gas station man took a look at that thing, looked at the engine, says, "You'll never get that thing past Oklahoma."
Well, I'm saying to myself, Jesus Christ, this thing is fucked. Look, it's painted weird. The mechanics behind it are equally as weird.
While everybody was working on the engine, I was messing around with the headset and was going, "We're on our way to San Jose, While I was doing that, I happened to turn around and I noticed Chloe looking really glum. I said, "What's wrong?" And she says, If it takes us this long to get to San Jose, she says, we'll never make it to New York City. She says, I can't take this. This is too chaotic. And that was as far as she lasted on the bus.
Yeah, I was pretty glad to get off. I mean, thank God I'm not crossing the country in it.
And you got back across the country by more civilized means, I imagine?
TWA.
TWA's the way.
There's been a one-step removal, I think, from our connection with life. And I'll tell you where you can see it. Go to L.A. We can't see anymore. We can barely hear anymore. When we look, we're not looking at, we're looking for. I tell you, Hollywood is soulless, an idea of what life looks like. What color is World War II? World War I is even a better example. What color is World War I? It's black and white, whereas the Civil War is in Technicolor. What happens if all of this stuff that's being sold us has damn near closed the door on any possibility of our doing anything new, on our doing anything except traveling in the same little circle? And if that is true, how do we break out of it?
Say Tony Perkins as a sick cat, not being approved of and all, as the son, you see, would be, so he'd have a mania.
All you can do is experience this thing. This, as near as I can see, is what's going on. As near as I can record it, it may not make sense. I'm just trying to open up like a camera and see it clearly for a moment.
I remember when we first headed out of L.A., out of Ken Babbs's place, where we'd spent a couple days painting a swimming pool and so forth.
When the bus headed out, Babs was living in San Juan Capistrano with his wife Anita and his kids. And we went through Capistrano, and he realized this is his merry band of pranksters, and he better climb aboard.
The original prankster credo that started the whole prankster movement was one of, you start off by saying, never trust a prankster. Because no matter how I try, I will eventually lie to you, even though I may not want to. If I say one thing today, it may not work tomorrow.
Go ahead, would you repeat that again?
This young lady said, Cassidy, you're the biggest hand that ever lived. Well, naturally, what would you do? When a loudmouth reforms, nothing worse than a converted sinner.
When we started out with the bus, I realized I wasn't going to be able to write a book about this, because you can't. It's an experience.
Mistaken judgment as usual, something of a nature of vaudeville pickup.
This wasn't literature anymore. This jumped off the pages and onto the streets.
Yes, that's it, Commander, as usual. Damn near went for a second. Now, you know I was awful high there.
We took off, went across the desert, and headed for Arizona.
Now, hear me. Clear to the rear, clear to the rear.
Cassidy talked a lot.
Well, now, hear me. Being over-geared and high as I've been without applying any gas because of the curiosity of the galaxy ahead. That semis had passed us basically.
We'd take turns riding shotgun with him so he'd have somebody to talk to while he was driving.
And I felt, and I'll tell you why it went over, because up my spine came the Kundalini again. Not the Kundalini as the purified, not the real Kundalini, the cleansed. You were living.
He was a radio. He just went on and on and on. It was almost impossible for him to ever shut off. He couldn't help himself. It had a lot to do with speed.
Thyroid, yes. Of this third movement, major portion, critical point.
Okay, settle in.
Attracting the cops and how to deal with concealing the drugs that we had, that was always a consideration throughout the whole bus trip because the cops were stopping us because they'd never seen anything like it.
I wasted your time. That's why I'm not ready.
Cassidy would always be out there talking to him and say, oh yeah, officer, he says, you can see what they're like back there. He said, but I'm doing my best to keep them in control.
Unloosen that thing. We're having a Brief equipment.
Our instant cover was always to get the cameras out and run out and say we were making a movie.
I don't know. We don't have a camera with any film.
People didn't think we were hippies or that we were drug freaks. That wouldn't have occurred to anybody because it wasn't in the news yet.
How did you get mixed up with LSD in the first place?
I came out of the University of Oregon, the prettiest little boy you've ever seen. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink. I went to Stanford on a Ford Foundation fellowship. And while at Stanford, I was given the opportunity to go to the Stanford Hospital and take part in the LSD experiments.
How did you become a volunteer for these experiments?
I, at the time, was training for the Olympics team and was in
As a
good
wrestler?
shape. Yeah, as a wrestler. I've never been drunk on beer, you know, let alone done any drugs, but this is the American government.
The study of LSD continues in laboratories and hospitals throughout the United States.
They paid us $25 a day to come down there, and then they gave us stuff.
What is LSD? How does it work? When did it all begin?
It all began in a laboratory very much like this one. In 1938, Dr. Albert Hoffman in Switzerland was looking for new drugs in the treatment of migraine headaches.
When I discovered LSD, it was believed it was a product of laboratory. And then we discovered that these compounds had existed already for thousands of years in the plant kingdom.
He had been studying molds that grow on rye plants. Now, it turned out that these substances were of no use in the treatment of migraine headaches. However, it was found that these substances could produce a change in mental state closely resembling some forms of insanity, in particular, schizophrenia.
When I was asked to do these drug experiments, I thought these drugs might give us a way to cure insanity, to overcome depression. That was part of what we thought we were doing.
What kind of preparation were you given for it? Were you given any?
None at all. I'd read a little piece in Life magazine about how they'd given it to cats, and cats were afraid of mice once they'd had LSD.
What was that very first trip like, though, under the experimental conditions?
It was on a ward, on a nut house ward. You'd go in, a little room, there'd be a bed, and a stand with some water on it, and a tape recorder, and nothing else. There's a little window right here with wire through it, and you could look out and see the people out in the other room.
Do you have any anxiety, or do you feel kind of excited about the idea?
Well, I feel more excited than I do anxious.
You feel pretty good about the whole thing and kind of open and just waiting to see what happens.
That's right.
That's very good. Certainly a good experiment.
The machine here to my left is all cogs and gears of electricity. I keep thinking that I should hear from it. I feel fairly drunk, like I'm lying on the back with the whirlies. They're down. Light at the top of the room is like a great eye, to which the optic nerves are leading to all the walls. Like the nurse who was in here, she's wearing this sheath-style costume, probably because the belly around her middle is beginning to be blue and overhanging, and she has to cover that blue, rolly flesh. It's like looking at Rorschach test and seeing mashed testicles. It's 1:45, and I'm high out of my mind. Wild color images. There's this great colored frog of a man outside standing at the door, like at some guy's room, and the guy's all teetering on the bed there. And the guy's yelling, "Mac! Hey! Hey, Mac!" This is the most insane thing. I just realized surprised how much the woolen sack microphone looks like a shaver. Woolen sack. Woolen sack. What a thought.
And also the trouble with you as a tape recorder, you waiting toad. Look at you there. You don't realize how much you look like this toad. From where I lay, I could see the unwinding reel. It's your brain, without which you don't even become a toad anymore. Just a dead thing which could be loaded with new brain. I can see it unwinding. Therefore, I'm going to shut you off because we're losing too much of your brain.
Yeah.
How are you feeling right now? Do you seem to feel there's still some effect of the drug?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I told you about the strobe light. It was so great.
What was the effect of the strobe light?
It was like a magnetic force field because everything that went into it was concentric, going into the strobe light. Bats and hen eggs and everything cascading into the strobe light, and it blinked. This guy next door was playing against bad rock and roll, and this would have an effect of very discordant in color.
It affected the imagery. You mentioned two things, bats and hen eggs. Were there other things you could see going in?
Well, there are more mathematical patterns, hexagons and pentagons and mummies and things that you might find on a pyramid wall.
Was this, would you say, an uncomfortable or a comfortable experience?
I think it's a good experience. I think anytime you see more, especially if you have a basic inherent love of most people.
And when I came out of it, I felt like it was like discovering a hole that went into the center of the earth, and you could see jewelry down there, and you wanted your people to go down and enjoy it.
Trailer for sale or rent. Rooms to let 50 cents. No phone, no pool, no pets. Ain't got no cigarettes.
Cassidy drove all night and everybody slept or didn't sleep, depending on what they were doing.
Was supposed to head to Tucson and arrived. No, there. Judge, as it were, police, how you do? About your previous plan, 69. Oh, all right, especially south.
In 1964, the ultra-conservative Barry Goldwater was running for president. What did you make of Kesey's Goldwater stunt in Phoenix?
I was kind of puzzled by the need to get into the politics of Barry Goldwater. I kind of thought the whole thing was sort of ridiculous.
A vote for Barry is a vote for fun.
It was a tongue-in-cheek thing. We wanted to wave the flag, but waving the flag downtown in Phoenix kind of seemed like you're for Goldwater, so we painted the vote for Barry as a vote for fun and then drove down the main street of Phoenix backwards.
Even as you were driving the bus across the country, reviews were coming in for Sometimes a Great Notion, and they were peculiar.
Yes, they didn't know exactly what to say about it. Cuckoo's Nest was a phenomenon. It received nothing but good reviews.
Most people are surprised to learn that you'd never even seen the movie. You even threatened to sue the producers.
I told these lawyers I'll never see the movie. They emphasized the melodrama.
Who's the villain in Cuckoo's Nest?
The nurse.
No. The Combine is the villain, and the big nurse is the minion of that, but she's not the villain. I'm mopping near the ward door when a key hits it from the other side, and I know it's the big nurse. She's carrying her woven wicker bag full of 1,000 parts she aims to use in her duties today. Wheels and gears and tiny pills that gleam like porcelain. Needles and forceps and rolls of copper wire.
Good morning, Miss Ratchet.
The big nurse tends to get real put out
if something keeps her outfit from running like a precision-made machine, what she calls adjusted.
Medication time.
She works with an eye to adjusting the outside world, too, working alongside others like her, who I call the Combine.
Chief? Writing that story from the point of view of that Indian, that's what makes that book.
And I don't know any Indians. I don't know where that Indian came from. Those first 3 pages of Cuckoo's Nest were written on peyote. I've always felt humbled by that character. Without the character of that Indian, the book is a melodrama. You know, it's a straight battle between McMurphy and the big nurse.
Isn't it true that the inspiration for the book came from your real-life experiences?
I got a job at the Nut House and worked from midnight to 8. Make no mistake about it, being crazy is painful. Looking out through the little window, through my crazed eyes, I saw that these people have something going and there's a truth to it. It gave me an empathy. This was, to me, supposed to be a revolutionary novel. It wasn't Freudian man against woman, it was man against machine. I took a deep breath and bent over and took the levers. I heaved my legs under me and felt the grind of weight at my feet and heard the wires and connections tearing out of the floor. I was able to get an arm around it and my other hand under it and let the momentum carry the panel through the screen and window with a ripping crash. I put my hand on the sill and vaulted over the pane. I ran across the grounds. I felt like I was flying, free.
We can blame the World's Fair for this, boys and girls.
Boy, it was just hot across that desert. And being hot and what did we do but just go look for a cool place?
Yield! Right away!
We'd ridden all night the night before, and I'd gone to sleep in one of the upper bunks, and my purse had slipped down between the bunk and the side of the bus and gone out the open window. It had everything in it. Here I was, pregnant, traveling with a bunch of madmen, and I didn't even have a dime. If I'd had my money, it wouldn't have bothered me at all, because I could have walked off at any stage. I could have gone to the nearest bus at any time. Now, I was trapped.
Suddenly, Cassidy drove right off the road and started driving towards this little pond and got stuck right in the sand. He drove it, vroom, and there we were, shocked as can be.
Ah, yes, stuck in the mud in Arizona desert in the summertime.
Cassidy, God, he was having a good time.
It was hot, boy, let me tell you, it was hot. It was blazing hot. There I am, that's me, and there's Kesey right behind me in the sunglasses, and we're all looking at it, and we're stuck deep in the mud.
If for no other reason than the fact that I'm going to bring you, if you don't get out, get out. Hey,
Kesey had sent someone off on the motorcycle to go look for help. And then Kesey had this brainstorm that, since we were going to be stuck for a while, we should take LSD.
So, I want to take some LSD. I want Babs to take some. Cassidy, you want to take some?
I would, yes, I would.
The ridiculous thing was that the acid was just mixed into a jar of orange juice that was in the refrigerator. Nobody had any idea what the dosage was. It was this sort of deal where you shook up the jar and passed it around and took a swig. As the acid came on, the setting up of the filming was starting to happen too.
What else we got up there? Another camera, no?
We're going to take the Aeroflex 2 magazines. We're going to have one magazine on the Aeroflex. We're going to have the The other camera with the zoom lens also mounted on a tripod. George's going to run the zoom on the tripod.
Was he filming that?
My merry band of pranksters won't be lollygagging around in the dirt. Come on, come on. No, no, none of this misery stuff. Come on, this is the merry gang. Keep it moving. It's Farm Girl. That's stretching. She's mighty fetching. Always scratching, just kitchen matches, and never itching.
There she is out there.
You know when you have a dream where wells carry you out to sea.
Once I hit the pond, I realized I was really high.
The little creatures had their little wings.
The water opened itself up to me in a new dimension. There was no murkiness. It was super clear, real crystal. It was just there for myself and itself to groove on each other.
If the birds fly in the ocean and the whales swim in the clouds.
It was a joy.
Farewell forever, Paula, as she sinks beneath the depths, and the next creature you shall see emerge, a slime queen, the high priestess of pranksters.
That's the slime, the algae. It was talking to me. It was welcoming me into its realm of existence.
Where the sunrise sets and the sunrise rises.
It was like the nature spirits, the stuff in there. It was saying, finally, we're in contact with a human being. We've been trying to get through to you guys for a while. They were happy, and I was happy.
Whales want to love your face. Whales want to be your friend. Whales want to love you.
That's Miss Slime of 1964.
These horses just showed up and added such a nice kind of backdrop effect.
Oh, there are the horses. It was incredibly beautiful. I don't remember much reaction to these horses. To me, they look kind of old and flea-bitten.
I was thinking about how nice it would look to pour some of those paints in up there. Let's see what they look like.
After we took the acid, I think it was Kesey's idea, we took bottles of dope paint, which are used for painting model airplanes. And it's enamel-based paint, so when you put it on the water, it floats.
Oh, and that's I'll never drink downstream from the Merry Pranksters campsite.
So we had lots of colors. So we were dipping the colors in there and watching it all marbleize. We took Zonker's white t-shirt and put it in the water with the paint and invented tie-dye.
God, I was pissed. They said, oh, it's water soluble. Oh, don't worry about it, man. Worry about what? That's one of my clean t-shirts. Fuck your clean t-shirts, somebody said. George said, back up, just like I do. Spin around. Fuck you. God, watch this thing. Actually, I was having a good time.
Stark Naked really started wigging out.
She's definitely stoned on acid. We put all our acid in 1-quart ball jar of lemonade. And I remember seeing her run down to the refrigerator and get it out and upend it.
Get a picture of Ron over here, Mike, with this thing.
Kathy was loaded. Hagen says, I'm going to make a movie star out of her no matter what it takes. You know, it's the pretty girl movie star trip, you know. The guy with the camera comes along and says, hey, pretty girl, how'd you like to stand in front of my camera? Sure, why not? You're going to make me a star. Judy Garland in the drugstore or whatever the trip is, you know.
Hey, here's the thing. No, 2 more of these and I think we'll be able to start using film. Yeah, set up.
The first signs of strain were beginning to show on some of the healthy young faces.
And I was trying to keep things together there because I could suddenly see everything coming to pieces.
Here was this mad woman on my hands. What have I got myself into?
Throughout the bus trip, you seem to enjoy the chaos, but at the same time, gently guide the action.
People felt that enlightenment was going entirely with the flow. But that's like being the ball in a football game. I'd rather be the quarterback. I want to handle the ball. I don't want to just be thrown around.
Ken was trying to run this whole thing and be all philosophical, and he was caught up in a million different trips.
And how long will it go on? How long can we wait for help when no help is coming for?
It reminds me of Mad Ophelia. I don't remember this at all. I remember swimming in the lake, but none of this.
For Stark, obviously it was too much to bear. For Gretchen and Babs, they fell in love.
Starting the bus trip, I was Kesey's lover, but after I met Babs, he and I became lovers and stayed so.
I wish I'd take all these spots back to Zane.
Okay! The camera's fucked up. Hey!
The tractor has indeed arrived. They're going to pull us out of this swamp. Standing there scratching his balls.
Okay, let's go! Take it! Come on! Backer! Whoa! Wait a minute. Yeah, it's got to reverse that.
I think you're pulling against each other.
She and Babs then developed great affairs since Romeo and Juliet.
I got my mojo working, babe, and I'm gonna try it on you.
The love relationships was one of the very obvious things that was going on. I mean, nothing was hidden, you know?
And I'm gonna try it out on you.
Babs was really worried that Kesey would be really pissed off because Kesey was single, because his wife wasn't there, so he was unattached sexually.
Now I'm gonna try it on you. Oh, yeah.
He did sulk for a while, but he kind of woke up out of his stupor and looked over and said, "Nothing lasts." So that became one of the prankster mottos, too. Nothing lasts.
All this stuff that we went through, all these intertanglements of our relationships, our marriages, and our loves and lovers, I think all of this is soap opera 101. It's like we're all in this class together. And we went through it for several weeks on the bus.
Stark Nick had never quite recovered from Wickiup. All her molecules, I don't think, came back together. And she climbs out onto the platform in the back, and pretty soon all the truckers were honking behind us. Honk, 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 honk. And Cassidy couldn't figure out what was going on, so somebody looked out the back window, and there she had taken the blanket off her, and she was just standing out on the back deck, just flaunting herself. She had all the semis heading for Houston backed up behind us. Nobody wanted to pass us because they were all watching her.
That kind of madness is only terrifying and miserable to the people who are outside of it. To someone who's inside of it, it's really not. I just wanted to go into the darkness and be alone with my own thoughts. I think my psychic vision in relationship to myself was that I was getting a little bit homesick.
Then not long after that, we pulled into Larry McMurtry's, which was kind of a nice middle-class, very tidy neighborhood.
Larry lives in this upper middle-class collegiate section of town, and this electric multicolored circus bus shows up.
Larry appeared at the bus with a little child, and it reminded me of my daughter. I jumped off the bus and I guess much to his amazement, grabbed the baby.
And she opens her arms wide, and the blanket that she had wrapped around her dropped.
And she's standing there stark naked.